All right. Hello, Alexander. Thanks for
Oh,
joining us
Lihan,
today. Hello.
my pleasure.
Me too. All right. Maybe we can just begin with some brief introduction about yourself, about your team, and maybe about your project as well.
Sure. Well, I was CEO of large manufacturing corporations in my previous life, and back in 2015, I kind of decided it's time to jump on the technology train. I've been
Mhm.
investing since quite early, and since 1999, in my first IT startup, but really decided to go, full time and go big. And back in 2015,
Mhm.
and that's where I first kind of encountered blockchain technology and Bitcoin as the first use case. And I was completely mesmerized. And
Mhm.
basically, to cut the long story short, 3 years ago, me and my partners, now co-founders of Tone Labs, we're four people. We decided to focus full time on the blockchain space,
Mhm.
and we were kind of, picking the right project,
Mhm.
the project to focus on. And incidentally, at that time, I was lucky to meet the founder of Telegram, Pavel
Mhm.
Durov, and his team. And they
Mhm.
said, well, we're working on this blockchain project called TON, Telegram Open Network,
Mhm.
which is supposed to be kind of a new generation, truly scalable platform that will
Mhm.
be linked into the Telegram Messenger.
Mhm.
And I kind of thought that was amazing because at that time we were deep in the space already, working on a couple of obviously much smaller projects, less ambitious projects, and I could just paint the picture. And that was back in 2017, before even the ICO was really low. Could
Mhm.
paint a picture like, in terms of adoption, what kind of step change it would be if the platform is truly scalable, and can transact millions of transactions per second, and cater to tens of millions of users simultaneously. And smart contracts, importantly, we'll talk about that because it's a big thing, not
Mhm.
just transacting data, but executing smart contracts in parallel. And basically, we loved the project so much that we decided to establish a company called Ton Labs,
Mhm.
where again we're four co-founders, and I'm one of them, and CEO, and with the mission to build what we now call Ton operating system on top of the top blockchain. And
Mhm.
the idea is very simple. There are like three big things that are standing on the way of blockchain adoption from industry consensus, from my personal standpoint.
Three.
One is three. Yeah,
Mhm.
there are more actually, but three big ones.
Mhm.
um, One is, let's call it, the whole thing about performance and scalability, because obviously with block being formed in 10 minutes or even 17 seconds in terms of finality, or transactions costing anywhere between 20 to $100. I mean, you cannot make sense of it in gaming, most of gaming, and in most of fintech, in many other applications. It has to, for blockchain to truly compete with centralized architecture, centralized IT, like AWS and Azure and the other stuff. It has to be performance-wise, talking throughput, talking speed, scalability, latency, and finality. It has to be as good as centralized IT, or as close that users actually don't notice it.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. One thing is performance. The other thing is, which is kind of linked to that, is user adoption. And
Mhm.
Telegram was kind of addressing both of those,
Mhm.
with developing Tone and with working on integration with Telegram, which at that time was, when we met Pavel and his team, was only 180 million users. Now
Mhm.
they're up to 600 million users plus, uh, and closing the loop on WhatsApp quickly from my standpoint. But anyways, that's a whole separate subject. And then of course, the user adoption, because of that user base. First it would be the wallet, and then something else. And we
Mhm.
kind of thought that there were the third one left,
Mhm.
which is developer slash enterprise slash government adoption, but mostly developer adoption.
Mhm.
And the reason of that is, if you think of classical IT, you
Mhm.
have microprocessors from Intel, from whoever, and then on top of that you have multiple operating system. You have
Mhm.
Linux, open source one. You have Microsoft. You have the other stuff, and you have a
Mhm.
whole bunch of developer tools. You have
Mhm.
things like Firebase, which dramatically changed development for the mobile applications when it came up, simply because it eliminated the need for the whole bunch of code, and of course, tons of other tools. In blockchain, you don't have all of that. You have some really, really basic stuff, both for developer adoption and both for making it really user friendly. So the mission of Ton Labs was to address a third big thing, which is developer adoption in a wide scope, not just developers but also enterprises going forward and even large IT corporations. So we ended up writing what we call Ton OS, which is basically an operating system that sits on top of the blockchain, which you could think of as a decentralized microprocessor. And then it's basically, it's a whole middleware and going all the way to the front end with compilers, with a whole bunch of bindings like GraphQL and databases and Kafka and all of the other stuff to make it, really easy for developers to develop. And it's quite a comprehensive piece of code. It sounds sounds maybe small, but if you think of that, the blockchain itself is 500,000 lines of code. Ton OS is 2.5 million lines of code. So it's quite a comprehensive piece of software. And the idea was that Telegram launches the blockchain itself, and we simultaneously launch Ton OS on top of that. Again, breaking through the space for developer adoption and user adoption as well. And then when Telegram launched the alpha version of the blockchain, we were of course involved in debugging of Ton. We simultaneously worked on the second implementation of the node. Telegram's code was in C++, and our node from Ton Labs is on Rust. And I think having two implementations of Node in different languages is very cool. It helps to accelerate debugging significantly. It helps stability of the network. It helps if something happens with one implementation, and if both of them work simultaneously, you have a much more stable network. And also Rust is a little bit more secure and faster from our standpoint, and we see it now in the deployment as well. So when Telegram, obviously I skipped the whole story because I'm sure the audience would know the whole story of SEC versus Telegram, and then Telegram fighting and losing, which I think, honestly, to be honest, looking at what's happening in the space now, I think SEC kind of, what's the right word? I mean, if it would happen now, probably they would be more adaptive because I don't think Telegram actually broke many rules. They tried hard. But anyways, that's a whole separate story. So when Telegram had to step out of the project, we teamed up with Ton Labs. We teamed up with 16 top validators from the proof of stake space. The reputable companies who are validators, or even validators, the service providers for Polkadot, Tezos, Solana, Cardano, and some of the other networks, Ethereum 2.0, as it's coming up. Companies like Certus One, Chorus One, P2P.org, Everstake, Doki Capital, reputable folks from the space. And on May 7 last year, we launched Freeton as a mainnet. I'll stop at that to see if you have any questions, and then I'm happy to explain interventions in the governance model that we made, given that Telegram dropped out from the project.
Sure. There was a lot of stuff that you mentioned. So basically, you're trying to solve three problems. One is the scalability issue, and one is the user adoption, and the last one was the
developer adoption.
Yes, developer adoption issue. So, and your solution for that is not to design just a more scalable blockchain, but you want to add another layer on top of it that you call an OS.
Operating system, correct.
But yeah, an operating system. But it's not the same operating system that people have in mind, like Linux or Windows. But it's kind of some layer of softwares that can help developers or application services to use blockchain much more efficiently. Is that right? Or do you still see that?
I would say it's a 50-50 in the sense that if you think of classical IT as processor, operating system on top of that, it's the same logic here. I mean, the blockchain is decentralized computation platform, so it's a decentralized microprocessor, and TONOS is operating system that bridges it from the core processor, which is basically a virtual machine, and then consensus, etc. And then again, it has a whole bunch of developer tools. It has a very comprehensive SDK, software development kit. It has a lot of bindings. It has two compilers, notably, one from modified Solidity, which is basically allows very easy adoption for Ethereum developers on Ethereum. And the other one is LLVM-based compiler, which currently supports C and C++. And there'll be more languages coming up. It has, GraphQL, which is important because you can parse data with a blockchain, and then a lot of other tools that I want to save time. I don't want to explain. And then importantly, at the front-end level, we have a few front-end applications. The flagship one is a browser called TonSurf, and it's a 4-in-1 product. It's a messenger, very secure messenger. It's a wallet where you can make peer-to-peer transactions within the messages itself. So it's very native and intuitive. It's you can do staking out of the wallet directly. And the fourth thing is currently implemented, essentially browser. We have so-called debot technology, which allows you to open decentralized applications straight from that browser, without any additional interface, without any web interfaces, which is very important. We can talk about that. So it's fully on-chain solution. And again, debots, it's like, bots in Telegram, kind of, that allow you to execute, to open essentially dApps straight from the browser. And then there'll be fifth thing coming out later on, which is voting, which is fully on-chain voting by all token holders from the wallet. But currently it's 4 function, with 3 being pretty robust and the browser being filled up as decentralized applications come in. So again, it's a full vertical stack, all the way from decentralized microprocessor and all the way to the front ends.
Yeah. So maybe for the viewers who are not so familiar with the technical agendas, like so everybody knows about Bitcoin, that it's slow. Like we're talking about maybe 7 transactions per second, and then we have Ethereum that can run smart contracts, but still is maybe 15 transactions per second. And now now the other mainnets that has been funded like 2 years ago with ICOs are coming to the world, like that manages like maybe 1,000 or maybe a few thousand transactions per second. But I guess you were talking about 600 million users for Telegram, and I guess even maybe 10,000 transactions per second might not be enough to handle such a large traffic. And is that the reason that you guys are come up with another layers of software that leverages that can deal with much higher level of traffic?
Sure.
Is that right?
Sure. It's a great point that you're bringing up, and indeed it's been evolution of technology and resulting performance. And again, there are kind of a few things that you need to look at. Obviously, there is throughput itself, which is important, as a load comes through the network, and we'll talk in a minute about different kinds of load. Then you need to look at obviously the speed, which is important, for UI UX, for UX real user experience. You need to think, linked to that is latency and finality. Finality is very important. And I don't want to talk really so much about competition, but we do think Triton is pretty cutting edge. We are enjoying the average block time of 0.2 seconds. So average block time on Triton, if you look at our Explorer on like 0.2 seconds, which is quite refreshing. And then the finality for transaction currently is about 2.5 seconds, which I think is good enough for most of fintech and most of gaming, but particularly fintech. And with the second implementation of the node, with the Rust node, we are working to bring finality even further down. And we can see a lot of potential there. Now let's talk about a little bit about throughput and performance. I think what most folks in the space have been focusing on is, how many transactions uh, you can put, per second. And by transactions, it's something simple, like sending, Bitcoin or DOT or ADA or something else to each other.
Mhm.
And that's an okay way to see that, because from my standpoint, there's only been three large mass use cases in blockchain space so far. One is obviously peer-to-peer transactions. That was the case until very recently. The second being the
Mhm.
big one, I think, is the whole DeFi space, decentralized
Mhm.
finance, and we can talk about that. And the third one unfolding now is NFT.
Mhm.
So, and if you look at it already in DeFi, we see quite a lot of networks struggling. Obviously, I mean, we can all see Ethereum struggling, but more recently, some of the other ones, even don't want to mention names, but we know all of those names, big folks in DeFi space. And then if we talk about NFT, just imagine if it becomes mass. If there would be NFT-based tickets, if there would be millions of pieces of art sold, if it makes it into like one of the projects we're working on now, not we, but in our ecosystem, is NFTs in the wine space. Uh,
Mhm.
and there are millions of bottles of wine sold, every second, I assume, etc., etc. Music, imagine if all the music migrates to NFT technology. Once true NFT, which is important also, true NFT is cracked, which is not the case today in most cases. And then all of the musicians would enjoy the royalties coming from every movement of their piece of music. Just current networks will struggle, because it's not about transaction transmission of data. It's also simultaneous execution of smart contracts,
Mhm.
because if it's a certain business logic, it's execution of smart contracts. And then no network even thought about that until today.
Mhm.
Freeton is the only network, and again, I'm really not overselling. I mean, it's scientifically proven. I'm not trying to BS the audience here. It's Telegram invented what we call now multi-threading,
Mhm.
which is basically network, kind of network sharding itself, and then
Mhm.
this threading, which helps to support parallel execution of smart contracts.
Mhm.
And then that's the throughput we're talking about. When the load comes, when millions of smart contracts execute simultaneously, and that's something breakthrough that we truly think that's something revolutionary. It's not needed in the space today because there are
Mhm.
simply not that many smart contracts. But once we have those big cases maturing, DeFi and NFT and some other ones, I believe like identity will be big. Digital identity. I believe things like voting will migrate, even like elections, national elections will eventually migrate to blockchain. We can talk about that later on. I have a
Mhm.
funny story on that one. And again, where one of the use cases in Freeton is Guatemala-based voting solution as a pilot. So once we see most of those coming in, it will become very obvious that this is something that is very important, and that's we're lucky and also worked hard, obviously, to deliver that to the market. And it's now been 1 year of stable mainnet for the network.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
again, we have about 25 use cases hitting the ecosystem now as we talk,
Mhm.
and some of them will put significant load on the network, and we'll test what I just said in real life shortly.
Awesome, awesome. So, so you mentioned about DeFi and NFTs, and obviously, obviously, Ethereum was the frontier in that race as a mainnet. But as you mentioned, the overall throughput of Ethereum's network is just too slow and too expensive. Yesterday, I had to send some tokens from A to B, and it cost me like $40 for just one transaction. So, so in terms of scalability, Ethereum already hit the wall, but still they're very strong in terms of their ecosystem. And I know that a lot of people have been talking about Binance Smart Chain, for example. So in terms of the 3 points that you mentioned about the scalability, they just forked Ethereum, and then they switched to from POW to POA. and then they reached more throughput. And in terms of the user adoption, they just inherited um, MetaMask users because it's the same interface like in Ethereum. And in terms of developer adoption, they use the same language as Ethereum, Solidity. So um, how do you see the competition space between mainnet in that aspect? Do you think Binance Smart Chain will be uh, kind of a serious competitor to Freeton, or do you see as a future of a lot of mainnet coins existing
Sure,
and working together?
sure.
Or what are
Yeah,
Freeton's competitive advantage compared to Binance Smart Chain?
sure, sure. Well, obviously, I mean, Binance is a king in the space. It's no question about that. And I think their interjection with BSC was very timely. They're obviously eating a lot of, a lot of developers, a lot of use cases from Ethereum because, that's the most obvious place to go for different reasons. It's indeed better performance. It's a whole support of the Binance ecosystem, etc., etc. It's financing opportunities linked to that. And again, the whole Binance ecosystem. It's with the current speed of adoption, BSC will quickly see. From my personal standpoint, to be honest, I didn't dig into it like numbers wise, so I'll try to be careful in my statements. But I'm pretty sure with their capabilities and with again the speed of adoption, they'll see some limits in terms of performance of the network soon. What is soon is that 3 months or 2 years. It's again, I didn't dig into the data, so I'll give a large framework, but I'm pretty sure that we're talking like no more than 1 or 2 years there. So scalability will become important. As and again, I think Binance will have a lot of leeways around that. In terms of the kind of how we look at the space, I don't think some people are saying that Ethereum will take it all and will be king forever. I don't believe that. We already see that it's not the case. BSC making inroads, Polkadot is making inroads. Some early Solana is making some early inroads and enjoying some of the stuff. Ethereum will continue to be obviously very very big, and I genuinely hope that Ethereum 2.0 will eventually come and will be successful and sustainable. But again, they didn't put things like multi-threading in there, so even what they're launching is not as capable as what we have with Freeton. So what I think is going to happen in this space is there'll be a few networks. I don't think there'll be hundreds. My personal humble opinion is that there'll be like 5, 6, 7 networks dominating the space. Some of them bigger, some of them smaller. Some of them will be more mainstream, like Ethereum and maybe BSC and maybe Polka. Some will be more niche, like for example, Flow. Currently enjoys a very nice NFT niche. The niche that Freeton can take is that cases where you need true performance, true scalability, particularly when we're talking about execution of smart contracts. There might just not be an alternative even 3 years away from now. So I think once we'll hit more mainstream cases, Freeton will pick up, and we can actually see it where we're now one of the chains integrating with with the Chinese blockchain, BSN blockchain, with Red Day Technologies, our partners, and they look at it the same. They've already integrated with some of the other networks, and the reason they're excited about Freeton is that once there'll be mass use cases in China, which I have no doubts there will be very quickly, given the systematic way how BSN is being launched. It's not really blockchain with all due respect to BSN, but still, it's executed in a very disciplined and strategic manner. So once there will be a need for scalability, the 3 co-founding members of BSN is UnionPay, China Mobile, and Red Date as a core developer. So if either UnionPay or China Mobile decides to integrate blockchain as a backend, that's it. There might not be just another solution, decentralized solution in the space. So that's a niche that we foresee for ourselves. But again, there'll be a few players. And by the way, we're big believers in the interoperability. We already launched Bridge to Ethereum a couple of weeks ago. And DEX is in yield farming on top of that in test mode, but it's being rolled up in May as we talk. we're finalizing, by we, I mean community, not obviously on labs. We have nothing to do with it. Community is finalizing bridge to Polkadot, bridge to Tezos, coming by end of May, and BSN, as I mentioned. So already 4 integrations, and there'll be more going forward. So we're looking forward to a very interoperable space where we'll enjoy the niche, performance linked niche. And one element, important element of our positioning, and I know Cardano talked about that as well, and some of the other networks, but we're trying to focus and show that it's possible from the performance standpoint, is that we're not competing in the very small and geeky niche blockchain space, but we hope to eat market share from centralized IT space. As performance allows, user experience, which is comparable to centralized IT with advantages of blockchain coming on top of that, we think there'll be more migration of just developer entrepreneurs into the space. And also, we think the big folks like Microsoft and Google, IBM and Amazon and Apple and Facebook and all of them will eventually bring elements of decentralization in their ecosystems. And if there would be something to tap into existing and proven and tested, we think there could be natural adoption of what we do and some of the other folks do in the space. And everything that we do is 100% open source. We're big fans of free software and open source. So again, it's easy to pick up because it's open source again. So decentralized/distributed backends eating market share from centralized IT. That's a big game in the IT space for the next 10 years.
Yeah, that sounds pretty huge because even the traditional cloud computing is still growing so fast recently, and it's amazing that we can see the next generation of cloud computing coming from the blockchain space. And we talked about a lot about the performance issue, but if we want to compete against the AWS and Google Cloud infrastructure, we also have to be competitive in terms of cost. So how far away are we to catch up those large-scale, low-cost infrastructure? And do we even have to compete with them, or is it possible? Because I guess a lot of blockchain infrastructure are built on top of those cloud computing infrastructures. So inherently it has to be more expensive. So how do you see it?
It's a great question. I think there are a few angles to answering those questions. One is the cost has been going down, and also some of the latest blockchains, including Freeton, are very focused on striking the right balance between, for example, cost of transactions and security. I mean, you cannot make transactions free because then it's just not secure. If the cost of attack is zero, it's just not sustainable, So you have to strike that right balance. And in our case, it's our cost of transaction has been fluctuating between 0.5 cents and 1 cent, with a tendency to go down, because the way Freeton is designed from the architecture standpoint is the more validators there are, the lower cost of transaction is, and that's a whole different technical discussion. So that's kind of one angle to that. Another angle is that I do think users would be prepared to pay a certain premium, reasonable premium, for decentralization. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention is, for example, the Serve, our flagship use case front end. We collect zero data, absolutely zero data. There are no cookies, there is no geolocation, there is no telephone numbers, there is absolutely nothing. And I think that's important because the new generation, at least from what I can see, the millennial generation coming into the space, they're no big fans of giving their user data away for free or in exchange for consumption of whatever, Facebook or Google, and their data being monetized. So I think that trend will pick up. And again, people would be prepared to pay a reasonable small premium for that to happen, particularly, for example, because it opens a way to monetize your personal data consciously if you want to. Like if you control, with your private key, your data in one shape or another, you can, and I think that conscious kind of transparent monetization of personal data is coming. That theory is coming. Short. That's a second angle. The third one is the all of the decentralized storage, token, for example, storage. And again, I don't think blockchain space is designed for storage today, from my personal standpoint. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But some of the protocols have been claiming that they are at parity or even figured out, lower ways of storing the data, like, Filecoin made those statements. And I incidentally have a call with some Filecoin folks later on today, to explore and penetrate, how true is that? Or it's a bit of a marketing thing, Some of the other protocols claim that as well, and even came up with some, some specific numbers. But to be honest, I personally never had a chance to test that hypothesis. That on the storage we can compete. And again, I don't think it's the key competitive advantage. Let's put it differently. It's not where blockchain or decentralized distributed IT should disrupt centralized IT. There are many different angles where disruption makes more sense and more obvious. So those there are more angles to that, but I kind of gave three ones that I think are important.
But listening to you, I recognize that the key would be to have a sufficient application developers or application developing companies that recognizes the advantage of decentralization and really integrates those decentralizing components into their whole system and applications. So how do you see the landscape of today in that aspect? So do you are companies realizing the benefits of decentralization already, or are we like 3 to 5 years away from such landscape?
It's a great question. It's a very complex question. There are a lot of facets to that question. I think some of them do. Like, for example, the whole DeFi space. I think it took the fintech space a little bit by the storm. And again, I think we're still very early on in terms of, it's very speculative. I mean, let's look at yield farming with all due respect. And I know everybody loves it, and everybody who is deep in the space makes a lot of money out of yield farming. But come on, it's not where, it's not where disruption is gonna shape up. But if you think at the space wider, everything from the ability of swapping the coins, at DEXs, and oracles, and oracle space at large, and peer-to-peer lending. Isn't it amazing to lend money to each other and have some sort of security around that?
Sure.
And some of the other DeFi use cases unfolding. I think that's kind of one early bird where industry at large, in particular fintech, is seeing, oh my God, what's happening here? It's 1 year ago there was like one unicorn, if I remember correctly, and now the last I looked 2 weeks ago, it was 23 unicorns in DeFi space 1 year later. It doesn't happen in fintech. You don't have 23 Robin Hoods or Lemonades in the classical fintech space in 1 year. So and again, a lot of that is linked to the peculiarities of the crypto space. Like, you can obviously, there is a lot of, let's be fair, dumps and manipulation in the space because it's very easy to do. But and regulators are not yet there, or they're being very selective about their activities in the space, regulating the space, which is a whole different subject that I'm happy to elaborate on if you're interested. Because, by the way, because Freeton made a lot of intervention, we made a lot of learnings from the Telegram case particularly.
Sure, so that's a very interesting topic, actually, because TON has a history of pain in terms of regulation. And as you mentioned, there are two opinions towards the DeFi space. One is, as you mentioned, it's growing so fast, 23 unicorns in 1 year or 2 years. But on the other hand, it's barely regulated. So nobody is paying taxes, for example, but still making a lot of money. And in my way, I might say, is it a really sustainable model?
I think
Will it function?
I think it will just evolve. It will just naturally evolve. The less speculative. I mean, if you look at the bigger picture, we'll remember the hype of the 2017
Mm,
ICO wave. The hype wave. It was not even Wild West. It was pre-Wild West. I
mhm,
mean, I remember when like my whole environment, including my driver at the time, were either thinking about buying crypto or doing their ICO. And some, celebrities doing their ICOs. Come on, it's a joke.
mm,
So, and look at the current wave, that we're observing now. It's much more robust. We have DeFi, we have NFT, and there are
mm,
more fundamentals to that. So I
mm,
think, you know, the balance of speculative versus fundamentals base will continue from what used to be 98% speculative, 2% fundamentals. Now, I don't know, 70%, 30%, 50-50. And then eventually we'll end up in the reverse pyramid where it
mm,
will be 90% plus, fundamentals driven space, blockchain space, and less than 10% speculative driven. Um, Token regulators, I mean, they will have to interject.
mm,
And of course they did with, we'll remember King Kick, we remember a couple of years, struggles. We remember, Telegram and of course
sure.
the current Godzilla versus King Kong fight of SEC versus Ripple. And
Mhm,
by the
mhm.
way, I bought a lot of popcorn to watch that one because it's not obvious, where it's gonna go.
Mm,
Um, so with all my anyway, let me not comment on that particular case.
mm,
And of course, SEC and other regulators are
mm,
going to work on, decentralization frameworks and what it will. By the way, that's an interesting subject because we made two big interventions when Telegram left the project in Freetown. And let me briefly touch on them, and
mm,
then we can go back into the industry at large. So one, which was a simple one, is we decided not to do any token sale of any shape or form.
mm,
So Freeton was launched with 5 billion tokens launched into three givers, multi-sig givers,
mm,
developer, validator, and what we call, referral slash partnership giver, with the idea of being given away only for free in exchange for contribution to the ecosystem and proportionate to that contribution. So pure utility,
mm,
and not to sell any tokens to
mm,
avoid any risk of don't being recognized as a security in the sense that there was a security offering. There wasn't.
mm,
And that was the second, since Bitcoin time, the second essentially what we call, clean and fair launch with no
mm,
token sale. There were some smaller protocols that did not do token sales on the primary market, but that's the second,
mm,
big one.
mm,
So that's the first big interjection, and I think it's important strategically once regulators will start, coming up with their frameworks, and some of the other protocols might struggle who did
mm,
ICOs, even some of the bigger ones.
mm,
That's my personal opinion, and shared by many experts in the space.
mm,
And the second big intervention is, one of the four elements of the Howey test. And sorry, by the way, the one big downside to not doing token sale is that you don't have immediate momentum on liquidity in the market first, because there's no circulation of tokens. There are no professional investors in the space. So you don't have like significant trading volumes. You have to grow that organically. And that's what we've been seeing with Stone Crystal, our
mm,
token. It went from zero liquidity to, reasonable liquidity now very organically with no pumps
mm,
and, exchanges listing by themselves with no with no typical, crypto games there
mm,
around managing liquidity. But the big upside is that you engage different kind of audience day one, because
mm,
once you do an ICO, the first folks you attract is classical traders, who are there to make money essentially on the token fluctuations.
mm,
In our case, there was no market, there was no trading. So the first folks who came were
mm,
folks who were passionate believers in decentralization and in the
mm,
governance that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So there are, for example, a lot of developers.
mm,
When Telegram left the project, we saw about 1,000 developers in the ecosystem.
mm,
Now we see about 3,000 plus developers in the Freeton ecosystem,
mm,
doing a whole bunch of exciting stuff. everything from simple things and all the way to, we have 4 implementation of decentralized exchanges coming now as we talk in May, June. We have 5 marketplaces coming by end of May, NFT marketplaces. So, and then again, that's all developed by independent community, not from labs or any other companies that was part of the initial launch. So that's one big thing which I think is important source of competitive advantage long term. And the second big thing is governance. One of the elements of the Hobby test where Telegram lost was so-called the concept of active participant. When there is a company or a foundation or whatever that has significant influence on the network and can influence the value of the token one way or another way. And that means it's a risk for retail investors, if that's the case. So to avoid that, Dawn was launched pretty decentralized day one with 17 validators, independent validators launching zero state/Genesis block 1 year ago. And then we hold a series of contests on the network. And now we have 450 validators on the C++ node. And now there is a Rust node contest, which will have another like 300 plus validators. So we're talking an ecosystem of 700 to 800 validators, truly independent, which is like extremely decentralized. And there's no exchange or any other entity that owns more than 5, 6, 7 validators. I think the largest number of validators is actually Ton Labs, because obviously we took 5% of network tokens upon launch, just like Satoshi did with Bitcoin. We thought it was symbolic, a 5% number, small, but still meaningful, obviously, to make sense of it. So we have like 13 nodes or something like that, and that's it. And then there is nobody else who has significant amount of nodes on the network. So decentralization is one aspect on validator angle. And then on the governance, we decided to run what I often call in interviews the largest social experiments since Wikipedia. And the reason I mentioned Wikipedia, I think it was great experiment of, can you make folks around the world to do articles just because they want to build the first, the first library of everything, of the knowledge in the space, without, again, central authority, but independent. So the experiment we're doing is more complex. Can you build kind of Wikipedia 3.0 in the sense that there are people around the world who are genuinely contributing to the network, be it translation to other languages, be it articles, talking simple things, but also contributing complicated code, bringing partners into the network, working on more advanced governance, etc., etc. And we came up with this concept of DAOs. We call it actually sub-governances, which are either geographical or functional. So geographical, we have now 6. We have South Korea, which was the first one. We have Mexico, France, China, Vietnam, and Pan-African. We have the Indian sub-governance being voted upon today. And I think Japanese one today or on Monday. And there are more coming up, the German one, the Spanish one, Italian one. So, and the idea is that it's a group of people who are enthusiastic about promoting free tone in their particular geography. Everything from translations into local wallets and, working with exchanges and, doing contests, local contests, etc., etc. And the second one is functional ones. We have 25 functional ones: DeFi, developer experience, DevOps, NFT, etc. A whole bunch of them, different kinds. And it's the same principle that they're passionate to build, for example, DeFi ecosystem, which is our most advanced sub-governance. They've done already, stablecoin contests, and there are a few coming up. And I mentioned already DEX contest and then the bridges, and there is more coming up on oracles, etc. By the way, it's important that I mentioned, and it's like spreading. The governance is spreading. The 17 initial validators now probably do, 3% of network activity and voting. The rest is spread into sub-governance, and it keeps spreading. And there'll be, sub-governances. And we found that that's the only scalable way from the governance standpoint, just like Wikipedia discovered that on content creation, and some of the other folks later on, like, Reddit and others, because that's the only way to scale, is that you embrace the crowdsourcing, the power of crowdsourcing of ideas, solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's scalable, and it's also very engaging because people get rewarded with network tokens, become stakeholders. Tokens worth something already on the exchanges, and in the wallets and etc. So and then people get even more passionate because they become ecosystem, stakeholders of the ecosystem. So they contribute more and more and more. Like we have guys who started from writing simple articles, and now they're stars at HackerNoon, for example. We have HackerNoon contest that comes out today, and I just saw a few minutes before the results. I saw the quality of articles; it's just mind blowing. And the guy who is the winner, he from the community, he went from simple to like world class articles, and can now be probably a top journalist. I don't know, at Forbes or Cointelegraph or something. And I don't even know the guy, by the way. So it's amazing to see the creativity unfold. So we think there is something powerful, which is not probably obvious today to, not obvious today to the large audience, but we certainly see it from the inside. And last thing I'll mention, and then I'll shut up, is we don't do grants, for example, because we think grants is centralized way of doing things. Because I decide if, or somebody has to decide whether Lihan gets a grant and Jan doesn't, or the other way around. There is a decision maker there. When you do contests, and that's how we do things, even complex stuff like dexes and oracles and stable coins, we do it through contests. Is nobody decides, anybody can apply, bring their solution, and then that particular sub-governance, their jury, votes and decides on the winners. And there doesn't have to be one solution. Like dexes, as I mentioned, will have 4 coming out simultaneously. NFTs will have like 5 or 6. The contest is about to finish in the next couple of weeks. So and they're competing, and they're challenging each other. So and then once you have contest, you don't have that thing that somebody gets a grant and then maybe loses motivation or whatever. They cannot crack it from the technical complexity standpoint. So with contest, you don't have that. So we don't have grants at all, only contests. And then we have, as I mentioned already, 3 givers. And the biggest one is a partnership giver, where we allocated 85% of tokens. And that's for adoption. That's the last element to close the gap on losing Telegram as a partner in Ton. So the way it works is 85% of tokens are given away to partners who want to integrate free Ton as a backend, or Ton Crystal as part of their, for example, loyalty program. Preferably both backend and the Ton Crystal itself. And we've done already 30 of those partnership. All of them go, it's not grant-like. They all go through community consideration and voting. And I never saw the case that somebody comes and community claps, what an amazing use case, let's send them 100,000 tokens. There's always critique, there's always criticism. In 99% of cases, partners walk away or adapt their initial pitch. And the adapted pitch has a deeper integration with Freeton and deeper integration of Ton Crystal. So, and it tends to be more and more sophisticated, the use cases. So we believe in that model. We've given away like a whole bunch of tokens already to partners. They tend to become larger and larger and in more countries. So we hope to achieve significant user adoption through that partnership model. So I'll probably stop at that because there's been a bunch of our crazy/creative governance ideas that I've thrown at you in the last few minutes.
Yeah, that's so amazing to listen. Talking to you, like I just asked you about what's your plan towards the regulation in the future, and then I guess the key of the whole story that you mentioned is not taking profits initially, and also building a truly decentralized community, right? That functions autonomously and not by a central authority that governs and decides all things. And by listening to you, you're already on a very successful track of building an autonomous, decentralized community that that like self-enforces to evolve the whole ecosystems, and I guess this is truly amazing. So
I'm not saying it's we already figured out like the eventual model. There are obviously some challenges to that very open and transparent model. There are a lot of conflicts going on because people thought that their solution was the best in that particular contest, and it only came as number two. And they're saying the jury is stupid or corrupt or whatever. But we can already see the power of that and the creativity unfolding. And B, we keep evolving. We'll move sometime, probably 3-4 months realistically. We'll move, as I mentioned already, to the governance 2.0 model, where it will not only be where all token holders will vote from their wallet, even if they have a few tokens. And then this will be like ultimate, governance democracy-wise. So we keep evolving, we keep learning. So, but it's certainly been interesting. And typically, as I give like interviews or AMAs, typically our partners who interview us are genuinely intrigued by the model, and they wish us to joy with it and success importantly with that experiment. And then I'm hoping that folks in the industry will pick up some of the learnings on our learning curves that we're living through right now.
Yeah. Definitely. So I'm part of it. I wish a lot in terms of Freeton's success, and and I think we got a lot of insights from you, like the last 15 to 16 minutes. So maybe I'll close at this point. Maybe last sports you want to mention additionally to the viewers here?
I maybe the only thought I had is that I myself come, from large business and from pretty classical and conservative industries like manufacturing of cars and airplanes, etc. And I'm just mesmerized by the space. It's this whole, and the space, I mean the space at large, this whole kind of decentralized governance combined with typically open source approach, with very open ecosystems, engaging ecosystems, with a lot of wild west kind of excitement, with a lot of money being made and fortunes being made. All I can say, I would just encourage the listeners who are listening to us and are not deeply in the space to look at it, or preferably even experiment. On the front end, it's been more and more user friendly. Like for example, I mentioned TonSurf. Like if you try to download it from App Store or Google Play, it's 40 seconds to install, and it's so easy to use that it doesn't really differentiate from the classical messengers or social networks or whatever. So the space is becoming friendly, the space is becoming welcoming, and I'm sure the future is there. As I mentioned, millennials love this kind of stuff. We can see it by watching the developers in the ecosystem, users in the ecosystem. They tend to be very young, very experimental, and I think the earlier you make it into the space, the better off you'll be, as it kind of shakes up a little bit the classical IT, classical financial systems, etc., etc. So join the, I wouldn't say the revolution, but join the intriguing, provocative, and very exciting space with us.
Yeah, that would be a great pleasure to join your initiatives and your community as well. So thanks so much for sharing us your experiences and insights and knowledge. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Lihan. It was my pleasure. Great question.
Me too. It was my pleasure.